Everyone, and welcome to our panel discussion on design versus development, the full stack conversational AI mindset. I'm your host, Fatima, and I'm super excited about our discussion with some amazing speakers joining us from across the globe. They have volunteered their time today to be here with us, so thank you and welcome. This event is exclusively brought to you by Conversation Collective, a community to explore, learn, and create technologies that leverage human conversations, including multimodal and voice first. Now, next slide, please.
Yeah.
So yes, today's discussion is on design versus development, the full stack conversational AI mindset. And I'll let each of our panelists introduce themselves to us. But before that, let's meet the event organizers. Now, it takes a village to organize these events, and it is my honor and pleasure to be a part of the Conversation Collective team. Yours truly, Ali, Ankur, Bhishma, Emily, Masha, Megan, Meredith, Olga, Olivera, PJ, and myself. Thank you so much, organizers, for everything that you do, and it's an absolute pleasure to collaborate with you all. Next. Yeah, Conversation Collective is a volunteer-run organization that relies on sponsorship. So if you're looking to hire conversation designers or become a sponsor, do get in touch with us or follow the link. So you will all the links will be shared with you via chats. And if you're new to Conversation Collective or just want to become a part of our ever-growing community, you can also follow the link here. All right, Vishma, I think your slide deck has been removed.
No, I was on mistake. Yeah.
Okay. All right, so you can also fill out our community form where you can provide us with the feedback or sign up for our newsletter and join our social channels like Slack or LinkedIn. Furthermore, you can learn about our upcoming events by subscribing to our newsletter and following us on Eventbrite. And that's a reminder again that all the links will be shared with you via chats. Next slide. Yeah, so here's a quick agenda for today. We will have a short intro and then the discussion, and we will have the last 15 minutes for the questions. Now, before we begin, I request everyone to introduce themselves in chat. Tell us where you're joining in from and what brought you here. You can also feel free to drop in any questions you have during the discussion. All right, now let's dive in. So I'd first like to start with Braden. Braden, could you please introduce yourself to everyone in the audience?
Sure. So hi, everyone. I'm Braden Ream. Oh, it put a spotlight on me. Braden Ream, CEO and one of the co-founders of Voiceflow. If you've used Voiceflow before, can you put like thumbs up in the chat, maybe like a little hi emoji or something? It'd be great to see who here has actually used us before. If you're not familiar, we're a conversation design platform used by about 130,000 teams. 10% of the Fortune 500. Lots of great folks, and yeah, we're just super excited to be here. And thank you for the Convo Collective for having me. And you guys run the best events and great branding as well. I'm looking at it's all looking really tight. So thanks for having me, and yeah, excited to be here.
Thank you. That's super. It is a pleasure to have you here, Braden. I'd like Mansi to introduce herself to the audience.
Oh, thank you, Fatima. Hi, I'm a conversation design manager here at Haptik. Been here for almost 4 years. I come from a copywriting and a scripting background, and I decided to suddenly switch to AI, and I love it. We at Haptik are, one of India's leading chatbot creating company. We worked on chatbots across verticals. We've also created new products that go live on WhatsApp called Interact. So really excited to be here. So much to talk about conversation design. I'm so excited that the field is growing up so much. Earlier, it used to be something, when I also joined the industry, it was so new, so rare. And right now there's so many people, so many questions. So I'm so excited to be here. And Fatima and I go a long way. work-wise and otherwise. So there's so much to talk, and I'm so excited to be here. Thank you.
Yes, yes. Thank you, Mansi. There are all ties attached, and that's why. And thank you so much for joining us in today. I'll let Tisha introduce herself to the audience.
Sure. Thanks so much, Fatima. Hello, everyone. I'm really glad to be here. I work with Mansi at Haptik as a senior conversation designer. My background is also from copywriting. I also was a founding partner for a chat marketing agency, and that kind of took me into conversation design and finally led me now to build and design chatbots for brands across the globe, from retail to enterprise. And it's such an evolving field. There's so much, as we're going to be discussing in our discussion today. There's so much that's constantly coming up, and so much to learn and adapt to. So really looking forward to this conversation, and welcome everyone.
Yes, yes. Thank you so much, Tisha. And all right, so that was a great start. Now, I'd like to move on to the three key takeaways that we have for this discussion today. And my first question is to Braden. Braden, could you tell me a little bit more about this role of a full stack conversation designer? Like, what does this role involve? And I want to ask, like, is it going to be a mandate for conversation designers to be full stack? What do you think about that?
Yeah, so I think in order to like define, we kind of have to like define what full stack is. In order to do that, you need to break down like what's contained in that full stack, right? So the framework that we use at Voiceflow is there's sort of three components of conversation design. There's dialogue design, which is like almost like the flow of the conversation. How does it manage state? There's the response design, which is like the actual copy. It's sort of a up-leveled branding version of copywriting, essentially. And then last is NLU design. Since at the end of the day, like your dialogue design sits on top of your NLU design. And so like, you could have the best copy in the world, but if your, NLU model is really bad, or your LLM, maybe we're going to talk about prompt design too. It's just not going to function properly. So I think, that's how we define full stack conversation designer at Voiceflow. It's someone who's able to come in and functionally take an assistant, essentially end to end from a design standpoint, from like taking all the utterances, clumping those or clustering those into intents, then being able to take those intents and actually map out what is the outcome, right? Like what's the user experience meant to be? What's the desired outcome and goal? Then being able to do the responses last once, we know, okay, this is generally what we want to do. This is the intent we're solving for. This is going to be the copy. Being able to go end to end, where at the end, it's a full artifact. You've prototyped it, you've user tested it, you can pass it off to the developer in its sort of full entirety. That's how we define full stack conversation design at Voiceflow. And the second part of the question was how relevant
is it going to be a mandate?
I mean, so I think to be a great conversation designer, you kind of need to be full stack, but I don't think it's necessarily required to be a conversation designer. And so a lot of this depends on how your organization works, and to be candid, like how sophisticated it is. Since if you're a really small team and you're the first conversation designer, congrats, you just got hired at XYZ corporation. They're building a bot or they're retooling a bot for the first time. You're probably gonna need to be full stack. There is no data scientist. No one else knows what an intent is at your organization. Like you kind of have to be full stack, right? As you become more sophisticated, suddenly, we start to see this at Voiceflow. You start to have sub teams break out. So you'll have like an NLU design team or a data science team that's just managing the NLU model. You might have a copywriting team, especially if you manage multiple languages, like a lot of enterprises do. Now your copywriting team is managing 6 different languages, response variations, your persona, brand guide, all that kind of stuff. And then your conversation designers are almost like the PMs of the assistant, managing like how does it flow? What's the overall user experience, user testing, prototyping, outcome design. Like you can start to break out and specialize. I think small company, full stack, bigger company, it helps if you know everything, but you can also choose to specialize.
Yeah, those are some great points, Braden, and I completely agree. It entirely depends on the number of people you have on team. And I'd like to know from Mansi, how do you think it works at Haptik, or how do you think is it going to look like for full stack conversation designers? Do you think they will be able to design as well as develop?
honestly, this is the right timing to ask this question. That's something we're honestly moving on to. In fact, we've like created this role where we call them the conversation design associates, where we're trying to onboard folks who have some amount of like they're tech heavy also, but they also understand copywriting or UX design as well. Conversation design is such a mix of so many roles. It's not in diverse to one. Like in Braden said, you have to know intent, but you also have to understand what an API returns. But at the same time, you have to also understand what the brand asks for. So it's an amalgamation of things. But again, I agree there that that's something I'm very, very sure of also after seeing these associates at Haptik, that I don't think it's mandate, but it's a good to have. It's probably gives you an edge to understand your problem better, because it's not just about the brand. It's not about the concern that your client has come with, but it's also understanding how to come to a best resolution for that problem. I have an offside to it. Sometimes knowing too many things technically also puts a limitation in the way you design. It tends to obstruct the way you think, because there are certain limitations, and that stops you from creating an amazing design, an amazing conversational journey. So I think it shouldn't be a mandate, but it's a good to have.
Yeah. Tisha, I'd like to know from you, what do you think? Because we know that, we also need to consult clients at a lot of points and a lot of moments while we are developing a solution. So what do you think about that? Is it going to be a mandate? Like our conversation designers should focus completely on designing and development, or there are some other parts to it as well?
Sure. So, like Mansi said, we have been exploring this role where, we have a conversation design associate who both designs and develops. And I feel that the more that they're able to do on one project, right, it makes it much more of an efficient process because then the knowledge transfer between teams is this one stakeholder who knows, is looking at the design, is looking at the development, especially when you're collaborating with clients. It's a different ballgame when it's an in-house project. But when you're collaborating with clients, you as one stakeholder who gets all of the inputs from all of the different, team members in the client's team as well, and then can produce a very holistic output, and there are no gaps in the knowledge. So I think while it's not a mandate, I think it's something that definitely is where we're going towards, right? I mean, the future of conversation design, I think is definitely is a full stack conversation designer, and just doing conversation design becomes too niche of a skill to have as a resource as well. And like Braden was saying, so as you grow, like of course when you're just in a small company with one conversation designer, maybe you would need to be full stack. But I'm also seeing that happening in larger companies where you are looking at enterprise clients for the same reasons that I have already talked about, where that knowledge gap is not there, and then you can have projects run much more efficiently.
Yeah, that's true. I agree to that. So I think then moving on to coming to the technical skills, Braden, what do you think having technical skills and proficiency on various platforms for conversation designers? So we've seen a lot of times conversation designers are stuck to one platform they are working on, right? So what do you think about that? So when we go into the market, like we are asked that, okay, you have knowledge of this particular platform, but what about this one? There are tons of platforms that we know. So how do we do that? I mean, how do conversation designers can bridge that gap?
I'm going to try to not sound like a big Voiceflow billboard here. I'll do my best, but
and we know Voiceflow is amazing. Like I have seen Voiceflow grow, and the features are just amazing that you have.
Yeah. Because so I'm going to go a couple levels up to try to avoid bias. I think. So when you think about like what a developer was, call it 20 years ago, you would have to know how to like set up a server, right? If you were a full stack developer. What you're finding now more and more is like as technology advances, the like lower level skills kind of move up the stack. So here's a good example of like conversation design today is a lot of like edge case prediction. Like a user might say this and therefore we need to handle it, right? And then you look at transcripts and you sort of iterate through that process till eventually you're covering as much of what could possibly be said as possible. With large language models, I think a lot of that starts to go away. And I don't want to be the person who, you know, pulls in LLMs. They were going to come up eventually, everyone. So
yes,
I break the ice. But with LLMs, it's not that the conversation designer is no longer, they're no longer having to predict everything. So now they can focus on higher level tasks. Like maybe now they focus on the persona a lot more, right? And so my point when I bring that up is, I think it's the technical skills are like what you're going to learn today. But I think the role of conversation design is going to be increasingly important as more assistants are created. Now, the actual technical skills are going to change. Today, you need to know how to write like great prompts. You need to know how to do a happy path. Like there's a lot of like technical skills that might not be relevant in a couple of years, but the overall mindset of a conversation designer of like great UX, like what does a good conversation feel like? Like how do we drive to an outcome efficiently and as pleasantly as possible? Like that sort of overall skill set and like mindset, which is kind of the skill set that I'm trying to get at, is like the softer part of it. I think it's become really relevant. Now I'll bring it down to level to the tools. I think the way that we view the market is you have like big end-to-end platforms that are typically very powerful, and most of them have a GUI, like they have a design interface. I think the challenge becomes as a company learns only one tool, then their designers become like designers, but chained to this platform. Our whole goal at Voiceflow, people ask us all the time, why are you not a full stack platform? It's because we're trying to be an agnostic platform. It's like, hey, you can design in Voiceflow and export to Haptik. You can design in Voiceflow and export to Cognigy. Exactly. Because we're trying to create like a standard design interface that then allows for best practices. That's our mission. That's what we're trying to do. That's my billboard advertisement. But TLDR is like conversation design as a mindset is the skill that will always persist. Think about like customer first, great conversations, the technical skills will change and the platforms will change too.
Yeah. Those are some great points, Braden. So Mansi, tell me about the list. If you have to list the technical skills that are needed currently for conversation designers, what would they look like?
Okay, so again, varies, but largely right from being able to UX design comes as your first step, right? Because the main task, I think, of a conversation designer is to create the framework of this journey. The edge cases or understanding the intent is the base of it, which creates your framework. So UX design is very important. Copywriting or even imagining conversation. So someone who's able to create conversation beyond copywriting, right? So someone not from probably a shorter version, but someone who's into a little scripting, or if someone can write long form copies, can smooth into this job. But in terms of technical skills, I think even understanding or reading a Python library, you may not be able to code, but at least understanding prompts, breaking down an API document, like even being able to read response and return copies to understand what your API is offering to you, gives you an idea how to manipulate and navigate this journey from giving the user an answer to their query. So every conversation's purpose is to resolve a user's query, whatever it is, whether they're looking at tracking an order or completing a purchase. The more shorter way in the shorter steps that happens, and the more comfortable the user is sharing their personal information, not sensitive data, but actually opening up and talking to these kind of chat bots, is the technical skill that can come when you understand what your API also offers. It's not just understanding the user's mindset, but also understanding what your technical if you have any limitations, how can you take those limitations and use it to your benefit? So
so I think in short, you are coming to writing the API requirements can be one of the technical skills.
It's not writing, probably even at least being able to read it further.
Being able to read it. Yes, absolutely.
Coding, literally. So the coding, definitely understanding. I mean, I think Python is largely used to integrate most of your, external client requirements into your API. So some amount of Python knowledge also, just to know, and it's great to have. I mean, even if you don't learn it before you join, you learn it on the job. It's great and it's super easy. That's the best part.
Yeah. Tisha, what are your thoughts on this? Having technical skills for conversation designers, how do they help them? Tisha?
When you have your technical skills, the conversational journeys that you're designing for, then it just makes it much easier to find workarounds before you actually, going with the design and then coming to blockers to find that the designs that you had, envisioned can't really happen because of technical limitations. So even when we're consulting with clients, it's very important for us to know exactly what the limitations are, because they may want the moon, or but we'll be able to actually kind of bring them in and show them what is actually possible versus what is envisioned. So that kind of helps you to be a little more realistic when you're designing. Of course, there was this point that Mansi made about how that also kind of reins you in when you're designing, because then you think within those limitations only. So it's a fine balance that you need to have, but definitely you should have those technical skills just to make your design more robust and actually practical. Because I mean, we'd love for our our chatbots and our IVAs and even our voice assistants to be able to do everything and more, but unless we know the limitations, which is what we get by knowing the technical skills, like some of the things that Mansi talked about, like the API risk. I think there's
No, that's fine. You can
correct,
continue.
So
Yeah.
yes, I lost my train of. So it's once you know your those technical skills help you to find the limitations and design accordingly. So it is important.
Yeah, and I think we've seen, like, all the times, a lot of times when you know about the platform and the limitations, and you know about the technical things that are going on within the chatbot deployment, and you are working with a developer, sometimes the developer comes back to you and says that, this is not working, or this is not functioning, and, you need to iterate, or you need to change something. So if we knew this beforehand, then we could have, made the workaround earlier itself. So I think having knowledge on the technical part as well helps a lot within designing and while implementing the chatbots and AI assistants. Now,
Olivera put this in the chat as well. All conversation designers, especially working in the enterprise, project management is such a huge part of the game. Like I find the dirty secret of conversation design is half of your skill set is knowing how to work within the current company you're working at and the current tools that you're working at. Like there's knowing how to write great prompts, there's copy, there's all the skill sets that can be transferred across jobs. And then there's like, you come to a new company, what does a flowchart mean at this company? Like how do I work with the developers at this company? What resources do we have? What NLU model? Like all that stuff is company specific. Unlike visual design is a lot more skill set.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. Like switching from one thing to another thing becomes a real task when you have to. Now, I think we'll move on to our most interesting part of the discussion, which is the usage of LLMs. And I think no discussion is complete because it has taken everyone by the storm in the last 6 months. So Braden, what are your thoughts on leveraging LLMs as a conversation designer within the day-to-day functioning? Like at this point, the advent of LLMs has changed a lot of things for conversation designers. So what do you think? How is it going to move forward?
Yeah, so it's such a tough question because it totally just matters on the time frame. I think over a long enough time frame, I think what it does, it pushes conversation designers up the stack, as I talked about before. It's very theoretical, right? Now, conversation designers can focus on outcome. They can focus on building more agents, managing more agents at scale. They can focus on persona design. Like, there's capabilities that just weren't possible before because it would just be too complex that now you can design for. That's the theoretical side. I think the day-to-day for like conversation design is like an inverse pyramid in terms of where the jobs are. So in visual design, there's millions of freelance designers who work with small businesses and such. Conversation design is the inverse. It's like, it's all the enterprise. It's all the Fortune 500, 1000, because that's where the scale of conversation automation is needed.
Yeah.
And so when you think about enterprises move slowly. And so like, the fax machine market's still a $5 billion market, right? I think conversation design and how we create conversations is going to take a lot longer to change. So breaking this down further, there's like runtime, which is like, the LLM's coming up with the actual dialogue on the fly, it's generated. And then there is like LLMs to be useful in creation. I think we're going to see a lot of like LLMs for creation enablement, but enterprises are not going to put them at runtime, at least for task automation, maybe for knowledge automation, like FAQs and stuff. That might start to blend in a little bit sooner. But I think it's going to be like automated flow creation, automated copy, responses, where the conversation designer is still like the spokesperson for the brand, right? If your bot says something horrible, who are you going to fire? You can't fire an LLM. You need to have the conversation designer who's like, I'm in charge of this. I'm in charge of what this bot says. I'm just going to do 10 times more work faster, right? I have way more leverage. And then I think, over the next couple of years, you'll start to see FAQ automation and then eventually full task automation, at which point the conversation designer is just managing more assistants with like less depth per assistant per se. But that's kind of our thesis at Voiceflow. It's going to take a while for it to bleed in. Long term, though, LLMs will kind of take some stage.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's the start of the change, and we've seen technology evolve like every day. So I think that's gonna move, but it's gonna take some more time. Or maybe it's gonna take slowly. Mansi, what are your thoughts on this one?
I completely agree with Braden. More so, I think it's a great way to increase the number of test cases, do a lot of QA, check, basically do those band-aid manual labor tasks that take a lot of hours literally that you clock, but you can literally focus more on doing the creative process. Every brand has a different voice and every user has a different sentiment, and that can only come from a human interaction. But these LLMs just give you options to think probably beyond. They may not help you give edge cases, but they'll definitely reduce the way you can give an output at a faster pace in all aspects, right? Even from development point of view, to understand what your technical restrictions come in can be understood much better using these platforms. So it's a great thing to come, but I think it's going to take a good amount of time for people to even get equipped, right? It's coming so quickly, but even understanding prompts is such a big, it's a big gap where people are getting adapted to. So even to get a task done, you have to explain what you want so well.
Yeah.
So
that's true.
Where
you need the prompt engineering skills, right?
It's for any aspect, right? To even get a small email written, you have to explain exactly what you want.
Yeah.
Getting that understanding is what is the base of where LLMs are now, and then headed to, of course, reduce time. That's, I think, the largest gap that's going to fill to help reduce development time overall, right from your design to go live.
Yeah, that's great. Tisha, what are your thoughts on having LLMs for conversation designers, like in your day-to-day functioning?
Well, okay, so I'd like to touch on a sore point that a lot of people think, and there's wild speculation about how having these LLMs is going to run us out of jobs, and we won't conversation designers. Why do you need a conversation designer if you have an LLM? So one, like Braden says, LLM kind of helps us to kind of go up a level and be the curators of all the generation that we're doing with these LLMs. And in another way, it also takes care, like Mansi said, it takes care of all our manual tasks, right? So we can, rise above and beyond and get into the very things that an LLM cannot do, that making sure it's like our bot is talking like the brand, making sure that, there are no horrible bot responses, making sure that everything is so much faster. Like, manually it would take us, maybe if you're looking at copy variants also for the bot responses, maybe it would take us an hour to say come up with 10 responses, right? But now you can do that in 10 minutes, and that makes your speed of developing of design so much faster. And then it allows you to kind of really leverage that potential to create much more, to create much better. You're no longer stuck in that rut of trying to do all those manual tasks. Everything is taken care of. So I think for conversation designers, the ones who learn to use it well, they can really benefit from it, and the ones who cannot, who do not, rather, who, it's very easy to learn, so it's just a matter of wanting to, who do not will find that it's kind of a blocker in their progress.
Yeah, that's true. And I've seen with LLMs, there is one thing, that your persona, the persona that we used to work on. Like earlier, we used to work on manually on the persona and building the persona of the chat assistant. But now I've seen, and like, for example, taking example of Voiceflow, like I've seen the feature of set AI and response AI. And you have to set a persona so accurately that, the chat assistant can answer the question in that tone and language. So I think that part of the designing has been taken care by LLMs very well, because you have the language, you have the tone, and the user experience, multiplies by, tenfold. I think, Braden, you can also put in your thoughts to it, like how the set persona and the persona has changed with the advent of LLMs coming into the picture.
Totally. So like I do a lot of conversation design on weekends. It's like building little side projects and things. It's interesting. I'm now finding myself spending, I used to spend a lot of time on the copy. And now as a conversation designer, I'm spending a lot of my time on like, how do I think about like conversation memory? Like, how do I write this persona properly? How do I change the system goal so that like the agent's like, responding properly? Like it's really interesting. It's just like, the first level thought when you see ChatGPT come out is like, all right, guys, this conversation design has been great. Let's pack your bags and, off we all go. Instead, it's just the challenges just moved. In fact, the amount of interest we've now seen from companies that were not in conversational AI who are now starting to get into conversational AI. Like I kind of put this in the chat. The complexity or the amount of hours needed to build a conversational assistant has gone down. I think we can all agree. The complexity and the number of hours to build a great conversational assistant has remained the same. You just need to put the effort into a different place. But now, because the barrier to entry to build a customer, an agent has gone down so much, we're going to see so much more than just customer support. We're going to see internal RPA. I think is going to be a huge use case. Drive-throughs, in-car assistants, like there are going to be agents everywhere. So I think, conversation design as a field is going to grow dramatically. I think the risk for conversation design is we as a, conversational collective do not frame ourselves as like the UX and like owners of these agents. And we tie ourselves to the skill set, not to the outcome. Like we as an industry need to tie ourselves to like, we build great agents for whatever that agent use case is. We don't just write copy, because if we tie ourselves to that, then, it's like, if you're a taxi driver, it doesn't matter whether you're riding a horse or a taxi cab, right? If you just tied yourself as a horse, driver, I don't know what the term would be, but like you'd be narrowing yourself to a skill set. So we as an industry, when you talk to people, we're responsible for great agent outcomes, and now that's become easier, which is awesome.
Yeah, that's true. But even with the advent of LLMs, I think there are some specific challenges and potential risks or limitations that we should be aware of. So, Mansi, what do you think about these potential risks that we need to be careful about? Because we have seen, like, we work with so many enterprise clients, and there are some very, very like delicate information or sensitive information, especially with banking clients. We have worked with so many banking folks. So what do you think we should be aware of when we are integrating LLMs into such use cases?
One thing I think most people are aware or not, but LLMs are not your source of truth, right? You have to validate the information that it shares with you. So you cannot be using it like your Google, that this is, even Google can be manipulated at this point. So that's one of the biggest risk factors, that you cannot just pick up a source of it, cannot be your source of truth. Second thing is, I don't think empathy comes out much easily from an LLM platform. Even if you induce a lot of persona in it, you have to bring it out on your own. Not just banking clients. Like I've worked, with very sensitive women issue clients. Like I worked for this, this NGO called How to Use Abortion Pills, and it was so sensitive to respond to smallest things, because any kind of conversation could have been a trigger point for a user. They could have come from a different mindset. Their outcome all is to understand whether they could use, get an abortion pill in their country, but what kind of fear is in them probably may not get translated into chat, but that is the job of a conversation designer, to be empathetic to that aspect, that step into their shoes to understand what all emotions could they be going through. No matter how many ways you can train, a model, there'll always be one that you'll probably miss out, or they might not be able to react to it in the most empathetic or warm manner that will want them to share more. Even in case of banking, right? I will think twice before looking up for a loan or looking for something that takes in all of my savings. So if you know,
sharing account details or a chat
we do
assistant.
promise data encryption, but if you're relying on someone else to figure that out for you, that security risk is very high. So these are, I think, the large things that I think could be the
Tisha, what are your thoughts on having specific challenges or considerations while integrating LLMs into conversational AI solutions?
So I think I'm going to Mansi's covered the main challenge that is with LLMs, which is they're not always accurate. You have to constantly keep fact checking, making sure that you're getting the right information if you're using it for information. I feel that the challenge that we have with LLMs is mainly just learning how to leverage them to the to the most potential that we can. And it's an iterative process. So like for example, you start with the prompt and then you keep iterating to get the result that you want. So currently where we are at right now, the biggest challenge with LLMs is learning how to leverage them, right?
Exactly.
So if you're not using them to generate information, then the source of truth challenge kind of disappears. But if you're using them for creation, in that case we're constantly making sure that we're refining them to get the right output that we want. So the challenge is basically just, it's like you have this like a genie, and you can only if you word the wishes that you want right, will you get the results that you want.
Yeah. I think I like your point, Braden, on having LLMs for generic conversations. Like we have, a separate fallback features, or probably a small talk module on the platform that can, help. So all of these features can definitely be leveraged via LLMs currently. And I don't think we have an answer if we can use it for sensitive or dynamic use cases at this point in time. I mean, it really depends on the type of use cases and how you are actually integrating it with your conversational AI solutions. All right, I think this is a really interesting topic, and I have another question for Braden. So Braden, this is a question we had from one of the registrations, and they have asked that, how should my AI product delivery cycle change with tuning and QA in the Gen AI world?
I think this again goes back to, there's like, what's the realistic and what's the theoretical answer? The theoretical answer is, run an LLM to go through your assistant, with a bunch of different user testing personas, find all the edge cases. You could, do that kind of stuff. I think for the short term though, like, kind of over the next year, I think you'll probably see more segmentation of like knowledge automation and task-based automation. So I think you'll see like a more clear distinction. And then because the reason for that is like knowledge bases are just going to become more and more involved in the conversation design process. And also whether or not you like just basically feed the knowledge-based response, or you pull the knowledge-based response and, create like a much more constrained response. Like there's a bunch of ways to do that. But I think the short term is it's not going to change too much to be fully candid. I think the long-term changes more than we all think. I think how dialogue managers work will probably change over the next like 5 years. Right now, they're very state-based and feature they're probably more transcript-based, running off like an LLM runtime. But yeah, the next couple of years, I think, or next year at least, it's probably going to be fairly similar. And you could find ways again to introduce LLMs at creation, as we've sort of been talking about. But for the most part, conversation designers are still running as PMs the same way they have been.
Yeah. I think at this point in time, it's just so much hype about the ChatGPT and LLMs and everything. It's just, it has taken us by the storm. But I think there's still a fear among all of us that it's gonna take jobs, or how is it going to look like, or how do I learn, and so many more questions regarding them. So
really quick, if you don't mind me adding, everyone on this call, I'm assuming everyone works for a large company or works for a startup that like services large companies. And that's just like the nature of conversation design, is the nature of like control of experience. there's a whole community now forming around like LangChain and like things like that, where it's like pure LLM agents. Just give them the API keys, give them a knowledge base, go nuts. And I think eventually these worlds converge, but right now they're distinct. And I think the reason for that is like, it's kind of like the self-driving car problem. Self-driving cars work 99.9% of the time. It's the 1% of the time that they don't work, the results are so catastrophic that it's not worth like being full self-driving. For enterprises, if you deal in banking or insurance, and if you give someone like a wrong answer and you like mess up with their money or their health or like whatever it might be, like there's the benefit of having like a slightly quippier response and something, you know, maybe that you could write normally is just not worth the risk. And so these worlds, I think, are going to stay separate and converge over time, but it's going to take some time. Yes,
absolutely. I agree to that. So Mansi, on that point, I have one question, and that is that who do you think makes a better copy? Is it a chat GPT or a conversation designer? What are your thoughts on that?
Honestly, if you're telling me if chat GPT would make a great copy if the one who asked for it wrote a great prompt, otherwise there's no way for chat GPT to write a better copy.
That was a nice answer.
Definitely going to be conversation designer. If there's instead of hiring a conversation designer, if you hired a great prompt engineer, it's definitely going to be chat GPT. But sentiment, no. I completely there's only so much that machines can replace, as much as the movies show us and prediction show us.
And I think in my point of view, I think ChatGPT writes a really long copy. Like, you know, you really have to again go edit and again, you know, make it to your preference. So I think, Tisha, what do you think about that?
Well, I mean, ChatGPT, like Mansi said, the output is only as great as the input. So can a copywriter write better copy? I would still say yes. ChatGPT still does the kind of copy that it provides is still to a large extent very generic. And there is a difference. I mean, we are still able to have the human touch that kind of makes the difference. Is the gap getting bridged very fast? Yes. As we're learning to give better prompts and iterate the answers that it gives, like for example, I just mentioned in the chat that while we are using it mainly for generic content, it's very easy for what a copywriter does is basically make sure that the messaging is in the brand's tone and voice, right? By making sure that the LLM is understanding the tone and voice and the temperature of the communication, we will be able to get a very close answer. A very close copy to what a copywriter could have provided. So but you still need to have the copywriter to judge if the copy is
correct,
as good as it should be, right?
Yes.
So it's
all right.
I think that the irony becomes, so customer support's like the dominant use case for conversation design today. How many times do you call the same store and like do you expect a different response? Like at a certain point, if you know, a lot of the merit of generative AI is being able to handle long tail use cases. And so I think for like fallback, small chat or small talk, great, right? But like, you know, if your customer support utterances are in like a normal distribution where like most of the questions are like the same 50 things, then it suddenly becomes like, what's the actual value of generative AI here? Like, again, you can give like some response variation and stuff, but we ran a benchmark the other day at Voiceflow. It was like well over 1,000 times more expensive. So suddenly it becomes like, you know, like
rather leave the LLMs aside and just have the NLU and NLP in that.
Yeah, like I think it's like a really cool tech demo, and then on the day-to-day, you do have to ask like from first principles, what's the, like if instead of just viewing it from a hype standpoint, like if we were, imagine NLU came out today and we'd NLU and we'd LLMs, like LLMs are going to win for like things that where it's constantly like generate blog posts, generate like utterance variations, like all that stuff's great. But when it comes to like just actually doing a customer support flow end to end, and I already know what most customers are going to ask, and I know generally where they get stuck, like, you know, it becomes a tougher question.
Yes, absolutely. It's good for long form content creation, definitely. Yeah. And to that, Braden, I also have another question, which is like, are we moving to replace NLU with NLG into the platforms?
So I think they're really symbiotic. And by the way, I'm going to put a time box on all this. So if this is recorded and you're watching this 5 years in the future, my response expires in 12 months. So as of right now, the benefits of an LLM it's like a human. It's a general intelligence that is high cost, but very flexible. Now, the thing is, NLUs are the inverse. NLUs are like, if you went to a factory, NLUs are like, it's very good at one thing, one domain. It works infinitely cheaper, far more accurately than an LLM, way faster inference, faster training, all that kind of stuff, right? Way cheaper. If a really good factory incorporates humans for variability, like, when you need to, change up the floor plan, all that kind of stuff, and automation. If you guys saw this, Tesla, when they first started, tried all automation, and they were failing miserably because they didn't have enough humans to manage the variability that comes with manufacturing. So I think for good conversational agents, it's going to be a mix of NLU and LLMs, where LLMs might handle more dynamic, unspecified tasks like fallbacks, getting someone back to the happy path.
Yeah.
Small talk, stuff like that. And I think NLUs are still going to be kind of like that first layer of defense, where like utterance comes in, determine like roughly in our very large agent, what task, what domain should, does this fall under? And then we can actually pass off to the LLM to be able to then do task completion. I think roughly speaking, that's kind of the roadmap. But I don't foresee us getting rid of NLUs for at least the next like couple of years, until like the cost differential comes down to maybe zero. Maybe you use, LLMs for everything. But.
Yeah. I think I agree. Like ultimately it's up to the ROI for the company, and each and every company thinks about that first. Regardless of any platform, any tool, anything as such. That's a great point. So I think talking about Braden, go ahead.
To give people a sense of the cost difference for GPT-4 for intent, we will release the report soon. It was $300 to run the intent. Like basically, we ran it through a data set where we just doing utterance match to an intent. It was $300 for GPT-4, and it was 20 cents for an NLU. That's the magnitude.
That's huge. That's huge. Yeah. So I think talking about the design artifacts, and Mansi, we know that we do the design artifacts separately. Even within Haptik. I'm talking about Haptik right now. So how do you think it's going to change, say 2 years down the line? How do you think your designs are going to change with the advent of LLMs coming into the picture?
I think probably 5 years ago, our designs were just straight journeys where we would probably do support. The user would ask a question, find the best shorter steps to answer that question. Today, just before we just use all of these LLMs, right now we're thinking more edge cases, we're thinking sentiments, we're thinking, we're intent driven. I think with LLMs, what's going to change is the number of variations or the type of answers that you have for a question to reduce, monotony. That's going to be one aspect in your design, which is going to get, modified with LLMs. Also, manual copy errors, your missing articles, use of emojis, a certain tone of voice, all of that will be the additional beautification that your LLMs add. So I think that's where the larger shift is going to be. I also feel that now journeys, your conversational journeys are so much more holistic, at least from, if I talk even just 2-3 years ago. And they're now, trained to answer questions which are just beyond what the user was also asking. In case a user tends to, ask something off topic, now the chat assistants are being trained to bring the user back on track in the conversation, or at least, ensure that they're not losing that customer in case it's a buying journey. So there's so much more dynamism, so much more dynamic right now. They're actually literally now conversational, I feel. And, things like disambiguation, your breakdown, suggestion prompts, all of this can be added with LLMs. But of course, this has to be driven by a conversation designer, but enhanced using LLMs. So I think that's great. I think that's the way it is going to be. It is going to evolve the designs over time. And Tisha, what do you think are the platforms today giving us the freedom to design separately as well as do the development?
Right. So I mean, there are a lot of platforms that allow you to develop right off the bat.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel that currently that's something that is still a little separate, where people, irrespective of whether you're developing directly or developing and designing at the same time, you should be able to, we still can't separate the two. So while I know a few conversation designers who prefer to just like get on with the development and start building bots and figure it out along the way, but then again they'll always have some kind of a framework to look at, and
Some
to
reference to do that. Yeah.
get some reference to do that. So what I'm finding more and more is that the different, I mean, irrespective of which platform you're using, having a design or at least a framework of sorts is very important. And that's when you can really start developing. There's never going to be a time, or at least it's not very practical. I wouldn't say there's people can't do it. It's just not very practical to just go ahead directly with development.
Yeah, that's true. And I think a lot of times, we have seen that, when you make iterations to your bot, and then you have to again take a look at your designs, then it becomes really difficult to, just go ahead and just take a look and then again go ahead and make iterations. So I think having like a single source of truth, like Mansi, we always say that, it's that the document is the single source of truth for us. That helps really, to just first design and then go into the development. Right. And looking at the time we still have some time. So Braden, this is a question from the audience. What do you think about the future of automating testing for voice bots? It can be time consuming as of today with some of the existing platforms.
Yeah, I mean, I think like user testing is one of the best applications of LLMs in my opinion, because like, I mean, this is something that we think a lot about at Voiceflow, and you could test multiple personas, multiple use cases all instantly, right? Like, when I think 2-3 years ago, like state of the art for conversation design, user testing was like WAS testing, right? Like you're just like gonna, call someone up and you're gonna act like you're the bot, or not call up a random person, but and that's how you're gonna get your feedback. And now with an LLM, you don't even need another human to do like a first round of user testing. I would still advise you have humans, just as again, like nothing's foolproof, and at the end of the day, like you can't beat the human at this stuff, but it'll automate a lot of it. So
yeah, that's true. All right. I think we can answer one more question. And Mansi, we have this, like, it's like, asked by so many people. Is prompt engineering the new skill to learn for conversational AI? Like, and we know the answer is yes, but what do you think?
That's when I'm working on every week on week. I try to even, bring it into the team at Haptik. It's more, I mean, I think a lot of people are getting intimidated because the word engineering comes and, you have an integration engineer and you think it's going to be a lot of coding or something, but just literally learning how to ask someone to do your job. You have to literally train, I mean, assume your LLMs to be like an intern on your first day. If that's what, like, do nothing. And you have to explain what you want to the T, right? From, your tone of voice to the number of words to the character limit to any pauses that you have to take, and your platform. So it's so important. It's definitely a skill to have. It's something we're also watching. It's something we look at when we receive tests or assignments from candidates. So definitely a skill to have. Absolutely.
Yeah. Tisha, what are your thoughts? But like, if someone asked you to reskill yourself as a prompt engineer, would you do that?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, actually, there are again, there's this thing that all of this AI is taking jobs away. It's actually creating jobs. Prompt engineering is a new role that has come up now, and people can are actually making a career out of it. So it's a great skill. I mean, I think it's a critical skill to have. I mean, it's you want to leverage LLMs. You want to the output is, as I've said, the output is as good as the input that you give. And if you can give the best input, you get the best output faster. So definitely prompt engineering for the win. Everyone needs to have it. Everyone needs to get and it's easy. And that's like Mansi said, it's not a difficult skill to get. It's easily, there's a lot of resources online. It's easy to learn. yeah, and I if you don't know prompt engineering by next year, then you're really missing out.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I agree. I think we should, all reskill ourselves. And we have just one more minute to, answer one last question. And Braden, I'd like you to take this one.
Can I actually answer the prompt question? Because I actually want to take
Sure. Go ahead, please.
The contrarian of view is that right now LLMs are like we kind of view them as like digital workers. That's my long-term view. And right now, prompt engineering is micromanaging because our like digital workers are just not that good, right? But we've all like for folks who have managed people before, when you make a great hire, you just tell them like one sentence what to do, and they just like they take initiative and they just nail it, right?
Yeah.
I think as LLMs get better, I think prompt engineering is like it. Right now, when the LLMs are really like quote unquote dumb, this is the most intensive prompt engineering you'll have to do. I think over time, you'll be able to give it more like less verbose commands and be able to eventually just say, hey, do this, and it'll just figure out how to achieve it. So yes. I think it's important to learn, by the way. Like I totally agree with the answers. I just don't think it's gonna like go exponential with the models. I think it's going to be a skill to learn, but it's not going to like, overtake copywriting or good UX or anything like that. So
absolutely. I think it's an additional advantage, or it's an additional skill that you can have with the other skills that you have as a conversation designer.
Totally.
All right. I think we are on time, and this was a great discussion. And thank you so much, Braden, Mansi, Tisha, for your time. Thank you so much, all the attendees that attended the event. And we'll see you next time with another interesting topic as Conversation Collective. Thank you so much, everyone. Bye-bye.
Goodbye.
Goodbye. Thank you.